In 2025, LEGO released new factions for the first time in over a decade. The last new factions to ever come out before this were the Red Dragons and Blue Lions. While these two were new for 2013, they were hardly unique in their design conventions, reusing lion and dragon heraldry for the nth time. So that makes the 4 new factions that came out this year, in all honesty, pretty remarkable, and it's led me to believe that LEGO might be getting ready to say goodbye to the classic factions of old. Let me explain why. When LEGO brought back the Black Falcons in 2021, it was clear that they wanted to leverage the nostalgia of Gen X and millennial fans of Classic Castle. They did this by putting the remastered knights into expensive sets like the Medieval Blacksmith, and then also cheaper ones like the Creator 3-in-1 Castle. Not only were the Black Falcons available in official sets, but you could also order the minifigs directly on the niche Pick-a-Brick website. This was fantastic for superfans of Castle, but in my opinion, this has held the theme back in more ways than one. While I and many other fans of LEGO Castle can appreciate the classic factions for what they are, most people simply do not have the nostalgia for them, and sadly that means some of these older factions just don't hold up today, even in their modernized versions. Gen Z fans of Castle love the Black Falcons and even the Wolfpack. I think LEGO really struck gold with these two factions, and they're just timeless. The same, though, cannot be said for the Forestmen and Lion Knights. These factions really feel like a product of their time, and in my view, LEGO did not do a good enough job of modernizing them for younger fans. Now look, I already know a lot of people who watch this channel are going to disagree with me big time. Even younger fans of Castle who love the Lion Knights and Forestmen are probably going to disagree with me. But I'm really not surprised by this, because you're all super fans of Castle like myself. The way I look at this is through the lens of a general fan of LEGO that might buy a few sets a year and isn't at all into the online LEGO culture. One of my main goals with this channel has always been to make LEGO Castle a more popular theme with the general LEGO audience. That's the reason I tend to avoid going into every little detail about the history of Castle and the minifigures. While it's fun to do that when you're already into the theme, that level of hyper interest into the backstory of these factions can be overwhelming to people just getting into it. Especially when you consider the fact that these old factions and sets do not look impressive to a modern fan that is accustomed to a totally different version of LEGO. The reason I'm bringing all of this up is to say that I want more people to get into LEGO Castle, and I just don't think that continuing to pander to nostalgia is the best way to bring in the most amount of people into this amazing theme. And that's why I'm so happy that LEGO is finally making new factions again. These 4 new knights are not held back by the need to stay faithful to what came before, and can stand out without having to look at them with rose-colored glasses. The Forestmen and Crusaders are really fun, but for one reason or another, they just don't have the same level of appeal that the Falcons and Wolfpack do. I did a poll in my community tab asking people which of these classic factions is your favorite. My hypothesis was that the Black Falcons were going to come out on top, with the Wolfpack in second place. And at the time of writing the script, that's holding true. I believe that this is because both the Black Falcons and the Wolfpack have a darker, grittier aesthetic than the more whimsical nature of the Forestmen and even the Lion Knights. The main reason I think these darker knights are more popular today is because of the tropes of modern medieval/fantasy media. For those of us that grew up in the late 2000s and 2010s, the most popular style of stories were closer to grimdark rather than the previous generations, where you had a greater variety of different fantasy stories. Now, I don't even really subscribe to the label of grimdark, as I think it's almost always misused, but I do think it's kind of helpful when looking at what kinds of stories have been in the mainstream over the past 10 years. When it comes to medieval fantasy stories, the biggest franchise of the 2010s was without a doubt A Song of Ice and Fire, or more specifically, the TV show adaptation. While I wouldn't describe it as grimdark, it's safe to say that Westeros has a much darker tone than something like Middle-earth or even Discworld. And an even better example that we can point to of grimdark fantasy is the works of From Software and the immense popularity of their games like Elden Ring. It's hard to argue against the fact that pop culture is currently obsessed with darker fantasy worlds. I myself am not even a fan of these games or their aesthetic choices, but I can't deny that it's simply what's in right now. I think there are so many reasons why the zeitgeist has kind of been captured by the darker aesthetics, but I don't want to go into that here. So to bring it back to LEGO Castle, I'm not at all surprised that the dark colored armor of the Black Falcons is one of the main things that people brought up about why they love the Falcons so much. People are just really into that aesthetic, and the same is true for the Wolfpack that again have a darker, more edgy look than the Forestmen and Lion Knights. I also personally believe there's a bit of a gendered aspect to all of this, with the Forestmen being the least popular of the four, but I know my audience, so I'm gonna let that dog rest. Now, why do I think LEGO might be moving away from the classic factions? Well, for one, they just put a ton of effort into creating 4 brand new factions with prints made specifically for them. From a business perspective, LEGO is going to want to milk them for as much as they can, and they'll almost certainly be getting added to Pick-a-Brick within like the next 6 months or so, where people are going to be able to start army building them. However, the majority of LEGO fans have no idea that online Pick-a-Brick even exists to begin with. So I can't imagine LEGO is going to stop there. I could see them continuing to make mid-range sets like the recent Horse Knight Castle, but for the 3 factions currently without a flagship set. That seems like the conservative answer to me. LEGO is going to continue to make Creator 3-in-1 sets featuring these new factions, as it's already proved as a viable way to cater to fans of medieval LEGO. But in saying that, so has the nostalgia bait expensive sets like the Lion Knight's Castle and the Medieval Town Square. Both of those sets are extremely popular, more so the Lion Knight's Castle though. And that's where I think the Black Knights come into play. So far, LEGO has remade every single classic castle faction in some capacity, except for the Royal Knights and the Black Knights. We already know that we're going to be getting a Sea Serpent remake next year in the form of a gift with purchase, so I think it's pretty likely that we'll see a Black Knight minifig included in that set. At the same time, it also seems plausible that LEGO will have another expensive castle set releasing in 2026 to go along with the GWP. Maybe it'll feature the Black Knights to go with the gift with purchase, or it might even be for the rancid Royal Knights. I really can't say right now, because it's all speculation at the end of the day, but it does seem like LEGO wants to remake all of their classic factions, and those are the last 2 to do it for. I personally believe that LEGO's going to continue to make these nostalgia bait sets for the classic factions, but only in the form of expensive direct-to-consumer sets and maybe as collectible minifigures. It just makes perfect sense for them to sell expensive sets for their classic factions, as the biggest fans of those old factions are going to have more buying power than the younger fans of the theme. Which loops me back around to the 4 new factions that I think LEGO's going to use to make smaller, more affordable sets as an entry point into the theme. So to wrap up this very rambly, messy video, I'll put it like this. Expensive sets featuring classic factions made for older fans, and affordable sets featuring the new factions made for everyone. This is what I think LEGO's got planned, but I mean, I could be way off base here. I have no idea. So with that being said, please let me know how wrong I am in the comments below, and a big thank you goes out to my channel members Gyojo, Faisal, Rio Bricks, Wachtermeister, and all of my other members for supporting these videos. If you'd like to become a member yourself, you can find more information in the description. And as always, thank you so much for watching.